Today's episode is brought to you by Next Insurance and Framer. I do also have to say that today's episode talks about alcohol and drug abuse, and more specifically, our guest's book is about how the loved ones and families are affected by drug abuse and what they can do about that. So I think this is great for everyone, but if you're listening with children and you haven't had a chance to discuss this kind of stuff, check it out first before you play it for the whole rest of the family. And of course, you can always go over to the greatest hits page over at marketingovercoffee.com and grab a Simon Sinek interview or Seth Godin. But I'm thankful we had the opportunity to speak with Craig about how to have some honest discussion about how to deal with some of these issues. So with that, let's get into it.
This is Marketing Over Coffee with Christopher Penn and John Wall.
Good morning. Welcome to Marketing Over Coffee. I'm John Wall. Today, I am so excited. We have Craig Jackson here to talk to us. I have known him for years, and he's this fantastic combination of he has the right attitude and brings the right energy, but he is also super smart. A couple months back, he posted that he had finished his manuscript for his book, so I was so excited to hear what it was all about, and that got some discussion going, and we've got to get him on the show is basically what I said. So Craig, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm super humbled by that introduction. I hope I can live up to it, but I'm very excited to be here today. So thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Now, your book is Beyond the Lies. Addiction is more than drinking alcohol or using drugs. And it's funny, there's a number of reasons. We talked a couple times in prep for this about, how this fits for our audience. And one thing that is just, as I've seen over in my career over and over again, is that, for a lot of sales jobs, alcoholism is a requirement. Like you're not going to get hired unless you
Absolutely.
are partying out of control, all the time. And in marketing too, it's the same thing. There's a lot of events and partying as part of this, but it's also the part of you really focus on persuasion and influence. And, it's really called manipulation in a lot of ways, but it is the same thing that marketers do. So there were a bunch of reasons to talk to you, but let's start at the beginning. Like, what drove you to write this? Where did this come from?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to validate your point of sales because of salespeople, because I was in sales for 11 years for my company, and that's definitely a role where it's very prevalent. And what drove the book was it was about 2019. I had been about 5 years sober, and I started getting calls from my brother's partner. My brother. This thing runs in our family. We're talking generations here. My grandfather, my dad, me, my older brother. And so I'm getting calls from his partner, and she's like, your brother's telling me he's clean. He's telling me he's not drinking, but something just doesn't seem right about him. I feel like he's drinking and using, but I don't have proof. And I would ask her to explain why she thinks that. Like, I was like, well, give me an example. And she would give me an example of the things that he said to her, what she was thinking. And in my head, I'm like, oh boy, I know exactly what he's doing because I did that too, And so what ended up happening was we had multiple phone calls over the course of like a year. And I was basically becoming her secret decoder ring to my brother's behavior. Like, she would tell me what was going on or what he was trying to portray. And I would tell her what was really going on because I did that stuff too. And I knew exactly what he was up to. And so what I realized was, going back to that manipulation word that you used, that's a big piece of why addiction is called a family disease, because the loved ones are subjected to this chronic manipulation. And, addicts and alcoholics too, they don't do this because they hate you or because they don't love you. They do it to protect their ability to use because that's their only coping mechanism. And so what I realized was, there's all these resources for addicts and alcoholics out there, rehab centers, all this kind of stuff, and insurance pays for it. And there's not a ton for the loved ones. And when I looked at what was out there for the loved ones, there was no secret decoder ring to addicts' behavior for them. And so that's sort of what I'm trying to do with this book, is be that secret decoder ring for them.
Right. And so talk about your own journey through this too, because we went down your whole history, and it's, 26-year successful career, you've got the house, the beautiful wife, everything's going right. No signs of addiction, but kind of what happened that made you want to change your life? Where did you go?
Yeah, there were no outward signs, right? So, one of the things I write about in my book is, what does it mean to hit rock bottom? We all hear that term rock bottom, but I really tease that topic apart to explain what it really is. And, for me, like you said, I didn't have those outward signs of being an addict or alcoholic. I was a big drinker and a pot smoker. And so I didn't have these outward signs. I had the two cars, actually had three cars. I had a vintage VW too in the garage. Beautiful wife, smart wife. She was a successful career. I had a successful career. I was killing it at work, actually, at the height of my alcoholism. I was in sales and doing awesome. But even though the outsides of addicts and alcoholics can look very different, what's the same with all of them is the inside and how they feel. And so for me, I started knowing somewhere deep in the recesses of my mind that, this couldn't continue. And that thought was swimming around in my head for probably a few years. And what ended up happening was coming down the back stretch, I was feeling the health effects of drinking too much. I was starting to feel chest pains. And of course, anytime you have one little itch or twinge and you go on WebMD, you think you got some major disease, right? But we all know what chest pains could mean. And that was really scary. And what ended up happening was I woke up on a Monday morning after yet another heavy weekend of drinking, and my chest pains were horrible. I had pain shooting down my left arm all the way to my fingertips. And I was like, oh my God, I think I'm having a heart attack. And so I did what you should do. I pretended like nothing was happening. I got my kids ready for daycare. They were really young at the time. They were like 2 and 4. Kissed my wife goodbye to work, dropped the kids off to daycare, came home. And without the distractions of, getting the kids out the door and all that, I was like, man, I can't, I need to go to the hospital. And so I proceeded to do what you should do when you think you're having a heart attack, and that's drive on the highway. So I drove myself to the hospital, and this is where it gets really interesting for my journey. I think I'm having a heart attack. I'm not thinking about the drinking part. I think I'm having a heart attack. And mind you, just for reference, I had already drank like 4 beers. My standard procedure at the end was to set my alarm early before my family, get up, drink 4 beers so I could calm the shakes, calm everything down, and then proceed with the day. And so I already had 4 beers in me. I'm driving to the hospital, think I'm having a heart attack. I call my wife at work. And I tell her this, I think I'm having a heart attack, driving to the hospital. And she says, so the normal Nicole, the Nicole I was used to, Nicole's my wife, would have been like, oh my God, pull over, I'll call an ambulance, I'll meet you there. But none of that happened. There was this pause after I said that to her that I thought I was having a heart attack, and I'm driving to the hospital. So there's this pause. And then she says, just be honest with them. And in my head, I'm like, that's a weird thing to say to someone who thinks they're having a heart attack, And that's all she said. She said, I'll stop by my after work. And she hung up. And the next thought that came into my head while I'm driving my car, right after I hang up the phone, was, I guess today's the day. And that was the day I stopped drinking. I actually stopped drinking in that moment. I didn't know it in the moment. This is upon reflection back to that, but it was pretty significant. And I got to the hospital. I was honest with the doctors. And so I was a huge hider. That was a huge part of my addiction because my wife was not a drinker. She grew up around drinking. She would not tolerate it. So in order to drink the way I needed to drink, like I had to hide it. And so when I was in the hospital and I finally admitted this stuff to the doctors and nurses, I literally felt like somebody lifted a boulder off my chest. Like it literally felt like that. So that was the beginning of my journey.
Okay, we just have to take a second. We want to thank Next Insurance for their support of Marketing Over Coffee. You know how we're always talking about protecting your brand? Well, what about protecting your business? If you're a marketer, freelancer, or running a small agency, you already juggle a dozen things: clients, campaigns, deadlines, cash flow. But here's the thing: one small mishap, a client dispute, or a contract issue can set you back fast. That's where Next Insurance comes in. They're built for small businesses and they make it ridiculously easy to get covered. You can do it all online in minutes. No calls, no paperwork, no hassle. Your business can be covered today. With transparent pricing, flexible plans, and instant proof of insurance, Next helps you protect your work, your team, and your reputation so one mistake doesn't undo years of hustle. And here's the kicker: you can save up to 30% and get coverage for as little as $1 a day. because protecting your business shouldn't be complicated, it should be smart. Head to nextinsurance.com/MOC to get your quote today and see how easy business insurance can be. That's nextinsurance.com/MOC. Get your free quote today. Again, nextinsurance.com/MOC. And yeah, we've been talking about Next. You know, it's great to just be able to get coverage done and instantly, especially year end. I am in the middle of Q4 crush. We've got stuff coming in, and the last thing you need is for some prospect to tell you, well, this deal can't close unless you can prove your insurance. So if you want any shot at getting that year-end bonus, you can add Next Insurance to your toolbox. You can get coverage quickly, prove you have insurance, get the deals closed, head off to the holiday party. Or if you're a little more proactive, get ready for 2026, have your insurance in order so you're not doing the last-minute scramble. Just check out Next Insurance, and we thank them for their support of the show. We've kind of gotten wrapped up in this because it's, it's so interesting to get your story and what you went through. But really the idea with this book is not a confessional. It is a working tool to help people to get where they want to go. So now you had said, there were problems with your brother and that, led you to have these conversations. And then at what point were you like, okay, I think, I can get this lesson out to more people. I need to write this down. Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know exactly how my interactions with my brother's partner turned into this project. She may have said to me in a phone call one time, oh man, this would be, everybody needs to know this stuff. Everybody needs to understand what's really going on behind the scenes with their addicted loved one and how their addicted loved one is manipulating them. So what I did was this began as a seminar. I do a lot of public speaking for my professional job. And I'm like, all right, I'll do a seminar. And I start writing the PowerPoint slides and fleshing out the outline and what am I going to talk about and how long is it going to be? And then the thought came to me one day, and this is exactly what your podcast is about. I'm like, well, how am I going to market this? What am I going to put on the sign, the placard that's on the, the tripod outside the door, at the hotel conference room? I'm like, what am I going to put on that? Come see Rando, Craig Jackson talk about, addiction. These people aren't going to know who I am. And so what I decided was that I need to write a book first. I need to turn this into a book for a couple of reasons. One, so that I gain credibility, and two, so that I can reach more people, because if it's just a seminar, then only the people that are in the room hear me. And so, my goal really is to help as many people as possible. And so because of that, it turned into a book.
Okay. One thing that has always jumped out at me about this book too, is the idea that it's for the loved one. It's not just the addict. Here's the thing the addict needs to do. And we know Alcoholics Anonymous focuses on the 12-step program for the alcoholic and all that, but this is something for the loved one. So tell us more about where that came from and how that came together.
Yeah. So through that experience with my older brother's partner, what I came to realize is that, there is help for the loved ones, like at Al-Anon, for example, of addicts and alcoholics. However, there isn't a great source of information to outline their problem. What problem have they gained from living with an addict and alcoholic in their life? And so, I've done a lot of therapy in my life, and I know from some of the different therapists I talk to that, there's this concept called the identified patient. And the identified patient is the person in the family system that has the obvious problem. The person that all the other family members can point to and say, if they just shape up, everything would be just fine around here. Right. And in any family system, the addict or alcoholic is obviously the identified patient, right? They're the ones with the obvious problem. And what this book is going to do is going to help the loved ones understand that they have suffered damage also. It's not just the addict alcoholic that has a problem that needs to be resolved. The loved ones, because they've lived with them, also have a problem. And so what my book really does is it really outlines, it really brings that problem home for them. Hey, this is what they did. This is how it affects you. This is what they did. This is how it affects you. And so it really is going to be that resource to help them. It's almost like a preamble to the loved ones seeking recovery themselves, right? Because if you go to a doctor and the doctor doesn't ask you any questions and they give you a prescription, say, take 3 of these in the morning and 2 at night and you'll be fine. You'd be like, well, what am I taking these for? I don't even know what I have, right? That's where my book comes in, is it helps them understand exactly how they've been affected and why they need recovery too.
Okay, when we were talking, you mentioned the tangled ball of yarn. There's this knot that is the source of this problem. Tell us more about that and how that works.
Yeah. So this book is going to talk about many topics about addiction that are kind of off the beaten path topics, right? Everybody knows that addicts and alcoholics use drugs and alcohol. If anyone has one in their life, there's been a scene at a party or an argument with a drunk partner or an incident with the police, that kind of stuff that we all think about when it comes to addiction, getting fired from work, whatever it may be. But, behind the scenes, though, that's actually, to me, the actual using of drugs and drinking of alcohol are a sideshow. They're actually a distraction from what's really going on with the disease. And there's all these sort of side topics that come with addiction that is what's in the book. And those side topics create this big knotted ball of yarn that is this knot in the loved one's chest and this knot in their stomach that they know something's just not right, but they don't have proof. And why am I so irritable all the time? And why can't I sleep at night? And why do I feel the need to control everything? A lot of the common symptoms of the loved ones of addicts, because the addict or alcoholic is out of control. So the loved ones try to control everything else because that one piece is out of control. And so this knot, it's just this big tangled knot. And so what I do with this book is I try to pull this knot apart one piece of thread at a time or one piece of yarn at a time. And so each chapter, each subchapter is focused on this one little length of yarn. We're going to focus on this right now. And then the next chapter pulls another piece off the ball. And then the next chapter pulls another piece off the ball, and the ball shrinks down until it's just separate pieces. And then the later topics that are a little more complicated that involve those previous pieces, we kind of build the knot back together again. So I pull it apart and I show them, hey, for example, addiction isn't usually substance specific. And what I mean by that is I hear it in recovery all the time, like an addict might identify as an addict only, and they do not have a problem with alcohol. But when you listen to their story and they reveal the details of their story, sticking a needle in their arms or snorting a line or smoking a rock out of a pipe started with drinking almost every time. And so the reason why I talk about topics like this in the book and pull apart these threads is because what does that mean for the loved ones? At the end of every subchapter, I have this section that's called what does this have to do with you, right? And so for this particular topic, what it has to do with the loved one is that their addict or alcoholic loved one may try to convince them, hey, look, I had a problem with heroin, but alcohol and marijuana is okay, and there may be some very small subpopulation where that's okay, but in my almost 11 years of experience in recovery, going to thousands of meetings, listening to thousands of speakers, the probability is extremely high that they're incorrect with that assessment that, they can use other substances. So that's sort of the ball of yarn. I try to pull it apart one piece at a time and then build it actually back together and show the loved one reading the book. I kind of walk this journey with them. I show them how all those pieces come back together to make what they feel inside.
All right, we just have to take a second. We want to thank Framer for supporting Marketing Over Coffee. It's the end of the year. This is a perfect time to look at your tool set. And really, you ought to think about upgrading. So many design tools are either gated behind a paywall or you're having to use a whole stack of tools to get things done. Not Framer. With Design Pages, you get full-featured professional design experience, including vector workflows, 3D transforms, image exporting, and more completely free. Why be jumping between tools to update your website? Framer unifies design, content management system, and publishing on one canvas. No handoff, no hassle, everything you need to design and publish in one place. Framer already built the fastest way to publish beautiful, production-ready websites, and now it's redefining how we design for the web. With the recent launch of Design Pages, a free canvas-based design tool, Framer is more than a site builder. It's a true all-in-one design platform. From social assets to campaign visuals to vectors and icons, all the way to a live site. Framer is where ideas go live, start to finish. You get your whole workflow in one place, no Figma imports, no messy HTML. It's faster, cleaner, more efficient. Ready to design, iterate, and publish all in one tool? Start creating for free at framer.com/design and use code MOC for a free month of Framer Pro. That's framer.com/design and use promo code MOC. Framer.com/design, promo code MOC. Rules and restrictions may apply. If you want a true design tool that also publishes professional production-ready sites, check out Framer, and we thank them for their support of the show. Right. And so what are some of the biggest, of these pieces of yarn? What are the ones that surprise the loved ones the most that, they kind of have no idea that this is happening? But, here are the things that you point out to them that give them something so that they can better understand what's happening around them.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really challenging ones is the topic of delusion versus denial. One of the most common phrases you'll hear the loved ones say is, "Oh, they're totally in denial. Like, can't they see what's going on? Can't they see what they're doing to their life? They're totally in denial." And that's only partially correct, because what's also present is denial's evil sibling, delusion. And delusion is much more sneaky and under the surface and behind the scenes, right? A denial, if you look up the definition of the two, a denial, you know what happened and you deny it. It's a lie. It's just a lie. And it's a conscious lie. But when somebody is in a delusion, they believe what they're talking about. They believe the lie. So it's not a lie to them. They believe it. It's their truth. And so it's really difficult to deal with somebody in a delusion. And with addiction comes delusion. And some of the most common delusions are, I'm not that bad. I'm not hurting anybody but me. I can stop anytime I want. These are very common delusions that addicts and alcoholics have. At least I'm not as bad as him over there, whoever him is. They try to find someone worse. So the challenge with that is, how do you get somebody to admit they need help when they don't think they have a problem? So that is why this topic of delusion versus denial is so important to talk about and really tease apart, because the loved one, right, maybe talking to their partner or their kid, whoever, whatever the relationship may be, it could be a friend. Maybe like, can't you see what you're doing to your life? Like, they're baffled. They're baffled that this person can be acting like this and continuing to send their life down the drain because they're not in the delusion. The addict is in the delusion. So that's one of the topics I talk about, and that's an eye opener for people. And one other eye opener I would say is the depth of the manipulation that happens. I think the loved ones know and friends know that addicts and alcoholics manipulate, and that maybe they've been manipulated. But in my book, I really break it down, and I give a couple example conversations of short conversations. And when I tease apart the words that are used and the way they're phrased, it's insane how much manipulation occurs. I've been told by some of my readers, which I have a Substack page where people can go and look at some of the writings that I've posted there, which are basically subchapters from my book. But there I give, in a couple of those articles, I talk about manipulation, and I give a couple examples of short conversations that are just absolutely loaded with gaslighting, and you don't realize it until someone points it out to you. And so one of the comments I've gotten frequently is, wow, this was really eye-opening.
Yeah, people, you're giving somebody a map, because that is one thing I did. You see over and over again is people are confused. They're not sure what's going on. At least they're basically filled with doubt. But you had an interesting point, even saying that, the loved ones, this is actually emotional and physical damage that they're, feeling because of this chronic manipulation. Are there other things that come out as ways they've been classically manipulated? Like, it is interesting talking about the language that gets used. What else is in there as far as other ways that they're trying to control the situation?
Yeah, I mean, so manipulation, like, someone can manipulate you in a bunch of different ways. Like, they can try to get you to doubt what you saw, smelt, or heard, right? Like, so they can get you to doubt what your senses are telling you. So I'll give you a quick example just from me. I out myself in this book everywhere because, this is the thing, is if I'm not vulnerable and put this stuff out there, I can't help people, right? And so I'm very vulnerable in this book. There's a lot of personal stuff in there that 98% of the people in the world would not share. But in order for me to accomplish my goal of helping people, I have to be vulnerable. So that's just a little preamble. I'll give you an example. So it's a weekend day. I would drink maybe 20 beers average on a weekend day, every weekend. And so towards the end of the day, Craig's a little tipsy, right? And so if I'm walking across the room and I kind of stumble and Nicole sees me, what do? Right? Quick recovery. And I do this without even thinking, by the way. It's not even a premeditated thing. I kind of bend over and be like, ow, my calf. Right? Like, hey, I didn't stumble because I've drank, almost a 30 pack today. I stumbled because I have a calf cramp, right? So just like things like that people don't realize that, and it's chronic, because this is the thing with addicts and alcoholics. They're thinking about drinking or drugging 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? And so part of the way that that the loved ones get sick too is that while they're playing checkers, the addict and alcoholic is playing chess. It's not even the same game. It's not the same plane. It's not the same level of expertise. And so just little things like that constantly. So if my wife sees me stumble, right, of course she's going to think, oh, has he had too much to drink? But then I bend over and hold my calf and she's like, well, maybe he has a calf cramp, but I'm not sure. So what ends up happening is I get her to doubt what she saw. I get her to doubt her intuition, her gut instinct. I separate her from her. I separate her from her own intuition. And that's one of the big ways that manipulation, because then what ends up happening is the loved one is just in this constant confused state and they don't know. They lose trust in themselves is what happens. And it's sad. It's a lot of the repair work we've had to do in recovery.
Another thing in the book that was interesting to me, because this is, especially as a parent now, you fall into this of like, somebody will talk about some new drug or what's going on and you kind of have no clue what's going on. But you said you've addressed this in the book. Talk about, what gets people high and how you can educate people on that.
Yeah, it's a chapter called What Substances Can Be Abused in the book. And, I don't give an exhaustive list in there, but I give a couple examples that are eye-opening, like the first thing I'll say is don't trust the people marketing the drug or the doctors when they tell you, oh, this is non-habit forming, like if you want to know whether or not someone can get high off a drug, ask an addict or an alcoholic. Like they'll tell you whether or not they can get high off that drug. And it's easy to plug them into Google and get a recipe. I used to, cause I know this because I did it myself. I did it by going through other people's cabinets and seeing what they had in there and Googling it on my phone to see, hey, can this get me high? Or you know what I would do? I would look for the little sticker on the prescription bottle that had like the tired eye, right? Like they're trying to help people when they put those stickers on, but what they don't realize, they're helping addicts and alcoholics find which ones can be abused. Like if I saw alcohol intensifies this effect, I'm like, that's the one I'm taking, but even over the counter, so that's prescription, but even over the counter, like Dramamine, you can abuse Dramamine. You can get a high off of that. If you take a whole sleeve of them, like, the box comes with the blister pack, you take the whole blister pack, you can get high. One of the times in college that I was the most messed up, my friend and I chugged a thing of cough syrup. Any cough syrup with DM in it. The DM is a highly psychotic drug, actually, when you take enough of it. So, yeah. So I try to open people's eyes to, they may actually probably actually have medicine in their cabinet that if they have an addict or an alcoholic in their household, that person can get high off of. So it's about creating awareness around that.
Okay, so you're in the position now where you've got it written, right? It's at the editor. It's getting ready for publish here. We're shooting for a January launch. Looking back on all the work you've done, what do you feel and how has this changed the way you look at all this stuff?
It's been a long journey. It's been a great journey. I'm an engineer by degree and by career. So I really had to learn how to write with emotion. I'm used to numbers. I'm used to technical stuff. And I'm really excited. I'm humbled at the people that have showed up at just the right time to help me with this project, including you, including the editor that I worked with, including the woman I'm working with now to help me with the marketing piece. It's amazing. The book cover is coming together. The final edits are done, and I'm shooting those off today. Actually, that's not a lie. I'm shooting the final edits off today to send to the layout people. So it's crazy. I don't know how many thousands of hours I put into this. I've probably written the book 4 or 5 times over. but I feel great about it. I'm humbled at the process. I have a newfound respect for any author that's released a book, right? And I can't wait for it to be out so that people can get it in their hands and seek help.
That's great. The book is Beyond the Lies. Addiction is More Than Drinking Alcohol or Using Drugs. We will have that in the show notes. I'll have a link to it once pre-order goes live, and we will bump it again when the newsletter comes around. Of course, you can sign up for the Marketing Over Coffee newsletter over on the website, or you can sign up for the text line at 617-812-5494. Craig, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on, John.
All right, that's going to do it for this week. So until next week, enjoy the coffee.
You've been listening to Marketing Over Coffee. Christopher Penn blogs at christopherspenn.com. Read more from John J. Wall at jw5150.com. The Marketing Over Coffee theme song is called Mellow G by Funk Masters, and you can find it at Musical.ly from Mevio, or follow the link in our show notes.